Writing. The thing that caught my attention wasn't even the meeting itself, it was the timing. Because while cameras were focused on Princess Leonor's latest military appearance, there were suddenly whispers coming out of Madrid that something else had happened quietly behind palace walls. Not public, not official, and definitely not approved. According to people close to royal insiders, Leonor allegedly arranged a private meeting with Christian, a meeting that Queen Letizia reportedly wanted stopped before it even happened. And honestly, that changes the entire conversation. Because this isn't just another royal rumor anymore. This is starting to look like a power struggle over Leonor's future, and maybe even over who controls the image of the Spanish monarchy itself. Now think about it for a second. If this meeting was truly harmless, then why was there such urgency to shut it down? Why were palace aides suddenly redirecting media attention toward official duties and military schedules almost immediately afterward? That's the part nobody is explaining clearly. And the silence. Sometimes silence says more than statements ever could. What fascinates me is how different Leonor's public image has become over the last year. A few years ago, she was carefully managed, almost protected from public unpredictability. Every appearance felt scripted, every gesture measured, but now, she feels more independent, more willing to move without waiting for permission. And I think the palace knows that too. Because lately, Leonor has been projecting something that reminds me less of traditional European royalty, and more of a modern public figure building her own identity in real time. It's honestly similar to what we see with Prince William and Kate Middleton in Britain, except Spain's royal family doesn't have the same stability cushion the British monarchy has. That's why every decision matters more. And here's my hot take. I don't think this alleged meeting was only about Christian. I think Christian became the symbol of a much bigger fear inside the palace. Control. Who controls Leonor's public narrative? Who controls her private choices? And most importantly, who controls the future queen before she becomes powerful enough to control herself? Because once an heir starts making independent emotional decisions publicly, it becomes very difficult for palace advisors to put that genie back in the bottle. Now, before we go further, let me say this clearly, a lot of the reporting around royal families is built on speculation mixed with carefully leaked information. That's how royal media ecosystems work. The palace never tells you everything directly. Instead, you notice patterns. Sudden scheduling changes, carefully staged appearances, stories leaked to certain newspapers but not others. That's why people are paying attention to this situation. And there's another detail here people are missing. Leonor's military training has completely changed how the public sees her. That training gave her something priceless, authority. She no longer looks like a protected teenager. She looks disciplined, strategic, and prepared. And ironically, that stronger image may actually give her more leverage inside palace dynamics. I honestly think that's why stories like this are becoming more explosive. Because if Leonor had secretly met Christian 3 years ago, people would have dismissed it as a young royal being emotional. But now, it feels intentional, calculated, almost symbolic. And I know some people will say, well, maybe the palace is just protecting her. Sure, maybe. But protecting someone and controlling someone are two very different things. And sometimes royal families confuse the two. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe, I post every day. What makes this even more interesting is the contrast happening across Europe right now. While Kate Middleton's public return in Britain has been all about stability and reassurance, Leonor's story in Spain feels unpredictable. More emotional, more modern, and unpredictability is dangerous for institutions built on tradition. That's probably why every small rumor around Leonor suddenly becomes international news. Because audiences today don't connect with perfect royal images anymore. They connect with tension, conflict, human moments. They want to see whether future monarchs can balance duty and personal freedom at the same time. And honestly, Leonor may be the first Spanish royal navigating that pressure fully in the social media age. That changes everything. A single private meeting today can become a global headline tomorrow. A look exchanged during an event becomes analyzed for days online. One delayed statement creates theories everywhere. And this is where I think Letizia's role becomes incredibly complicated. Queen Letizia has spent years protecting the monarchy's image with almost surgical precision. Whether people love her or criticize her, you cannot deny she understands media strategy better than almost anyone in European royalty. Sometimes I honestly think Letizia approaches public image the way a top political campaign manager would. Every appearance has purpose. Every photo sends a message. Every silence is intentional. So if reports are true that she tried to stop this meeting, I don't believe it was random emotional interference. I think she saw potential long-term consequences. And maybe she's not entirely wrong. Because royal relationships are never just relationships. They become symbols, headlines, political conversations, public expectations, especially when it involves a future queen. But here's where things get tricky. The harder institutions try to stop something, the more attention they accidentally create around it. That's human nature. And honestly, I think modern audiences are beginning to sympathize more with Leonor precisely because of that tension. People today admire independence. They admire younger figures willing to make personal choices despite pressure. That's why this story feels bigger than gossip. It taps into a deeper question. Can a future queen truly live like a normal young woman while carrying centuries of expectation on her shoulders? I'm not even sure the monarchy itself knows the answer anymore. And if I'm being completely real with you, I think the palace underestimated how much Leonor's popularity has grown internationally. Especially among younger audiences online. There's now a perception that she represents a more modern version of royalty, less distant, more relatable, more emotionally authentic. That image is powerful, maybe even powerful enough to challenge old palace rules. And let's talk about Christian for a second, because his role in this conversation matters too. What makes stories like this explode isn't just romance speculation. It's what the relationship represents publicly. People project meaning onto it. To some viewers, Christian represents freedom from royal control. To others, he represents risk. And to palace traditionalists, he may represent unpredictability, which is probably the one thing institutions fear most. Because monarchies survive on stability. Predictability keeps public confidence intact. But Leonor's generation doesn't operate that way anymore. They grew up in a world where authenticity matters more than perfection. And I think that generational clash is slowly becoming visible inside royal households across Europe. Honestly, if Mr. Beast were analyzing the Spanish monarchy from a modern audience perspective, he'd probably say the palace is fighting the wrong battle. Audiences today don't want flawless royal robots. They want emotional realism. They want to feel like these people are human. That's why stories like this spread so fast online. Not because people care about a secret meeting alone, but because they see themselves inside the conflict. Duty versus freedom, tradition versus independence, image versus reality. That's the real story here. And another thing nobody is saying openly, every attempt to tightly control Leonor's narrative may actually be accelerating her transformation into a stronger independent figure. Pressure creates resistance. History proves that over and over again. The more the palace tries to shape every detail, the more audiences start rooting for moments where Leonor appears to reclaim personal choice. That dynamic is becoming impossible to ignore now. And honestly, I think we're entering a completely new phase of Leonor's public life. One where she's no longer simply being introduced as Spain's future queen, but slowly becoming her own center of influence separate from the palace machine itself. That's a huge shift, because once the public emotionally connects with an heir independently from the institution, the balance of power subtly changes. Suddenly the monarchy needs Leonor just as much as Leonor needs the monarchy. That's why stories like this create nervousness behind palace walls. Not because of one private meeting, but because of what that meeting symbolizes. Autonomy. And in royal systems built on hierarchy and control, autonomy can feel revolutionary. Now, do we know every detail of what happened? No, and anyone pretending they do is probably exaggerating. But sometimes the unanswered questions become more revealing than official explanations. Why was there such urgency around the story? Why are insiders suddenly leaking conflicting versions? Why does every small Leonor headline now feel politically sensitive? Those are the questions I keep thinking about. Because the truth is, royal families rarely panic over things that don't matter. And whether this alleged meeting happened exactly as rumored or not, one thing is becoming very clear: Leonor is entering a stage where her personal decisions are beginning to carry institutional consequences. That changes how everyone around her reacts, including Letizia. And maybe that's the biggest lesson from all this. The future Queen Spain prepared carefully for years may now be evolving into someone far more independent than the palace originally expected. And honestly, that may either become the monarchy's greatest strength, or the beginning of its most difficult internal challenge yet. Did you like this feature?